We're at Orange Hat Brewery here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we've got some special guests for our cybersecurity panel here. We have Brian Doty from Kaseya.
Yep.
Here on my right, we've got Nick Christian from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. We've got Jennifer Ross from Watchguard here, and I'm super excited for this event. We've been planning this for a while now, and everybody's just kind of chipped in and made things look really awesome. So we've got about an hour to do this, and the first thing I want to start off with is story time because, well, everybody likes a good story. So can one of you or all three of you come in with some type of story of a prolific hack other than like Target or DoD, but a business that we probably haven't heard of or maybe we have heard of? I know Nick can't speak to specifics, so you'll hear a lot of generalizations in there, but he might be able to give us a little bit of a tidbit on something that he can speak on. But what's a story of a business that wasn't proactive that got hit by a cyber incident?
Brian, you want to start, and I can.
Yeah, I have one. So we have a partner down in Alabama that went to. There was a municipality, and it's actually the city of Florence, Alabama, right next to Muscle Shoals, if you've ever heard the song, right? Alabama song. But anyway, so he goes to Florence and he's like, hey, you really need to implement a business continuity plan, have some backup in here and everything. And they're like, okay, we don't really have funding for that. And they kind of pushed him off. And there's a packaging company right across the river, same scenario. Hey, you need to have business continuity plan and everything in place. And yeah, we're going to do that. And they put it in place and they get everything going. And it wasn't maybe 6 months later, the city of Florence gets hit with a ransomware attack, and they're down, and they're scrambling, and they never put the backup solution in place. So they're scrambling, and they go to this partner of ours, and the crazy thing is, same group of hackers hit this packaging company. Now, he had the packaging company back up and running within 2 hours. Their business was back and operational. The city of Florence was down for 6 weeks and spent like $400 and some thousand to try to recover, and really still never recovered all of their data. They lost a lot of data, not to mention what they exposed, the risk that they exposed, people's personally identifiable information, things like that in there as well. So that was like a tale of two organizations. One did the right thing and were proactive about it, took the advice of one of our partners, and another said, hey, man, nobody really wants our data, or we're okay, or that's not really in the budget right now, and it happened to them sooner than later.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the same thing. I think it's kind of like in cyber now, and by the way, this is a law enforcement perspective, so I can't speak about specific companies, but industry-wide, I can speak of that, but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? So now it's kind of shifted from let me keep the bad guys out to when the bad guys get in, how soon am I notified, and then how soon can I get them out of my system, and how soon can I recover? Because even in the healthcare world, they know how much it costs per minute to be down, right? So we see a lot of companies that try to do it well, but also moving from traditional antivirus to EDRs or, as you know, endpoint detection and response. So something that's automated and can mitigate those threats for you when there's no hands-on keyboard needed. So just give you an example that we had come up recently this month was, speaking generally, a construction company, mid-size. They had an incident and they called us out, and we went out on site and realized that they had EDR, so endpoint detection and response. And within minutes, they were notified of a certain ransomware group called Chillin. You might have heard of them. They were in their system, but they were mitigated. They got the network was segmented, so they were able to keep them into a certain area of their systems and mitigate that threat pretty quickly. Versus another company that called us out, which is a real estate company, and they were doing all the things they thought they needed to do with firewalls and antivirus and things and such, but they didn't have an EDR in place. So their first notice that the bad guys were in their system was the splash screen that says you're encrypted and you need to pay. So whenever you get to that point, it's kind of like, when did I know about this, right? If the bad guys tell you that they're in your system, that's too late. You should have known about it sooner, right? And that's not shaming the victim. Obviously, everybody has a budget. They didn't necessarily have the budget for sophisticated systems that would notify them. But that's something that for them to consider next time is how long was my company down, and could that have been mitigated a little bit better? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and we're also looking at like reputation loss, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's something that's hard to quantify.
Yes.
Jen, did you have anything that you wanted to add to all that?
No, but I definitely agree with the reputation thing and really like a story. I think they're always the same story, right? That someone thinks that their organization is not prone to being attacked. They think I'm too small. Why would they ever want to get my information? And really, that's the issue because it's low-hanging fruit for the people who are the bad guys, right? So I think reputation is a big thing, and it doesn't always come into play until it's too late. When we're looking at what is that cost of you building your business, the time, the money that's been spent, like all of the confidence that your customers and clients have in you goes away in 1 second. And that's very difficult to build back, just like it's difficult to build back everything you lost, all of your data. That might be even more complicated.
So, with talking reputation and losses, and we're really talking about risk. What is, for a company that's 25 employees or less, what are we talking the average cost is going to be? I mean, that's where the dollar and cents is kind of one of those big areas that we're talking about risk. But as you said, there's reputation, and that's something that's hard to quantify. But what can we put into dollar figures for, say, a company that's 25 and less employees? What are we looking at?
I mean, alone, like just with the downtime of business, right? So kind of getting back to like examples, I was working with a company that manufactured specific parts for agricultural machines. So they, again, never thought that that was something they would be under a ransomware attack. So they paid $40,000 in ransom, right? So you're taking that cost. They were down for 3 weeks. So whatever the loss of business cost in that is, I mean, that could potentially be hundreds of thousands or millions, even with a small organization. So then you start adding up the cost of people losing their jobs, right? It just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it depends how you want to look at it, right? It expands.
So, I mean, 3 weeks down, 6 weeks down, however it makes, you're also talking people losing their jobs because they can't work.
Potentially. Can't make payroll, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So-
a big problem, right?
Yeah.
So the averages are all over the map because it also depends on like how you define a small business. And so whoever's doing the study that says, you know, a small business gets hit and it's $4 million on average, well, like that number seems high to me, but they might be considering a small business with 1,500 employees, right? And so like when you're talking about a 25 employee company, what's a $500,000 hit to your bottom line? I mean, that's big. That's door closing type stuff. In fact, like 60% of businesses still go out of business. It's been like 5 years in a row. We keep hearing this number, like something like 60% of businesses close their door within 9 months of getting hit with a ransomware attack. And it's like every year somebody goes, is that still like true? And I have to go back and I have to find a source. And I'm like, yeah, it's still, it's as recent as 6 months ago. And it's 5 years we've been saying this. And it's like, when's it going to change? You know?
Well, and the interesting statistic from that is that of the businesses that stay in business after that 9 months, 50% of those businesses go out of business within 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so
That's-
that's one of those statistics that we know of just because
Yeah.
we sell the backup and disaster recovery, we sell the SOC, and all that stuff. So we have to kind of be on top of that stuff because it's
Oh,
not
absolutely.
just about that first 9 months or that first week after the incident. You've got that reputation, you've got the lack of funding, the loss of high quality employees, then you
Yeah.
got to train the replacements for them because if you're down for 3 weeks and you're not paying people, they're finding another job, right?
The other thing to consider too is like, did the business lose data in it, like that to produce whatever data, you know, maybe an 8-hour window you lost, that's productivity. That's lost revenue right there. And to have to go back and do that work over again. Can you imagine telling your employees like, hey, I know you've been working on this thing for a whole week, but we got hit by a ransomware attack. You're gonna have to do your work over again. Ugh. Like, who wants to have that conversation?
Sure. I mean, even the intellectual property that's left your company, right? So that's going to be scooped up by other companies that are competitors, and they didn't have to go steal it because the ransomware actors posted it publicly on a leak site. So now you have to contend with that and go recover your intellectual property and try to not have that hurt your company. And now you have to develop new intellectual property, and then quantifying that I think has been difficult for the industry. specifically, but just knowing that it's complex and difficult for them. And that's just ransomware. We didn't get into the business email compromise scams yet,
Yeah.
where the average cost is $98,000 per victim. So you're looking at $100,000 in loss just for that type of scam as well. So we'll get into that more, I think. But
Well, that's a good segue into my next question. So what are the top three cybersecurity threats that are facing small, mid-sized businesses here in Tennessee?
So what we're seeing in law enforcement is obviously ransomware is key, right? Right. It's kind of the leading edge of cybercrime, but realistically, the business email compromise is hurting more businesses in Tennessee than ransomware is. Ransomware is actually on a decline. I'm also, by the way, an FBI task force officer, so I'm not speaking for either. I'm speaking for myself, but I have the experience from both. And FBI did great work in combating ransomware threat actors and arresting them and holding them accountable, destroying infrastructure, going after their money. So we've done a great job this year at reducing that 70%. So if you view the IC3 annual report, you'll see that there's a decrease in ransomware losses this year, but there's not a decrease in the business email compromise. We'll go into that a little bit deeper, but BEC, ransomware, and data breaches are what's really hitting Tennessee businesses today.
Can you give us examples of that business email compromise?
Sure. So the BEC is, everybody's heard of the Nigerian prince, right? And this is often a Western African scam group that's responsible for the BEC. They also run romance scams in order to launder the money from those BECs overseas. But the way the companies see a business email compromise and how that affects them, because think about this, like if you're trying to monetize gaining access to someone's computer or gaining access to someone's email account, there's not many ways you can do that. So what this group figured out a long time ago with doing these types of scams was I can gain access to a company's email account, I can wait for them to talk about a financial transaction, and I can step in and act as if I'm that company in that communication and redirect that money to an account that I own or control through money mules or whatever else. So it's not a very technical crime. When you say it's a cyber crime, like even the FBI, we're trying to determine like, is this white collar crime? Is this cyber crime? Because like gaining access to someone's email, username, and password is pretty low-hanging fruit these days, especially with credential harvesters and info stealers running around everywhere. Like all the hackers get access to that. Even data breaches, like some of the major data breaches, you're going to lose your username and password. So companies that don't have that multi-factor authentication set up, those bad guys are going to get in, they're going to watch your email, they're going to wait for you to do something financially and step in and provide those alternate wiring instructions and move that money somewhere out of the country.
And so you mentioned MFA, multi-factor authentication. I just want to define that because we got a lot of people here that are not tech heads like you and I. And so multi-factor authentication, that's that annoying pin that you have to get texted or have to pull up on some type of application. That's what it's actually called. But it's absolutely important because that is that secondary factor, and we talk about the who you are, what you know, and et cetera, and this is one of those things of what you have, right?
Sure.
And so there's where those multi-factor authentications come in, and what we often in our acronyms call MFA or 2FA. So why do it's kind of like a helicopter getting into an accident versus an airplane, right? So why do they go after small businesses?
Well, I guess if you think about it, right, like you talk about Target, you talk about these huge data breaches. These companies have just an incredible amount of money. They have an incredible amount of resources. They have the right people, and they have access to the best technology on the planet, and they still cannot beat it. They still cannot get it done. They still cannot protect data. So then when you start looking at small to medium-sized organizations, right, what chance do we have? Because we can't necessarily buy this technology or manage it. Or you're, maybe trying to convince people that don't have a cybersecurity background that this is important. So to, of course, like attackers, right, they see it as easier. Because if they can get a few dollars from a small to medium business, it adds up just as fast as getting something that is like a huge task going after a large organization. And again, it's less effort for them. So it's a lot easier.
So,
Yeah,
oh, go
I
ahead.
think a lot of times the small business goes like, well, yeah, I don't have the budget to do that. I mean, I've heard that many times, right? Like this is too expensive, or do we really need all this? And it's like, well, we wouldn't recommend it if you didn't need it. But the thing of it is a lot of small businesses forego that, or they're not doing all the things they can be doing to mitigate that risk. And threat actors know this. They're using tools now to automate hacking. They're using AI. They, like, they're pretty smart at this now, right? And so it's not even about targeting a small business. It's about they have tools to automate this and look for those things. They even automate a lot of the BEC things now with AI, where it can breathe some context into it to make it sound like they're one of your coworkers asking you to wire that money or something. They've gotten really good at this. And when you think about it, hackers have one job. Like, we're all wearing different hats and doing all kinds of things. We're trying to run a business. We got family life and everything else. And like, hackers have one job. It's just to like get in and infiltrate your systems and steal that data or hold it hostage for ransom. But like, the small businesses aren't necessarily protecting themselves as much as they could. And obviously there's a lot to this, right? There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle here. So.
Yeah.
So you mentioned AI being a part of it. There's an interesting one. People can Google this called Black Mamba. And I know you all have heard about this. It's one that effectively uses AI to continually morph itself into something that's new, so that the EDRs have more trouble seeing it and scanning for it. And so AI has become one of those things that has made hacking that much easier. Now, and we'll get into this a little bit later because I got a question about it. But on the flip side, AI has been also a benefit. And I know Jen's got some stuff that she'll probably tell us about that. But what is one piece of cybersecurity advice to a non-technical business owner that you would make?
Take it seriously.
Take it seriously?
Yeah, take it seriously. I mean, and also secure the human. So all of your employees have to take an active role in cybersecurity. You can't just have all the products in place. Again, vendors are great, right? But at the end of the day, your employees are going to click a link. I promise you, they will.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen.
Let's screw it
1% is going to always click. So educating them and letting them know, hey, also a little bit of data ownership helps as well for people that are non-technical savvy and don't have all these terminologies figured out. It's just what can I do, and in order as like a CEO or CISO to say, I want you to have ownership in our company's data because it's also your data. That data ownership or the lack of data ownership from employees is also critical because you're going to have your identity stolen because of this data being stolen as well. So making them understand when you're doing this cybersecurity awareness training, of course, tailor that. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But like, I think that's the difficulty that companies have, is just getting the employees buy-in on securing your data in your company.
Does anybody have a recommendation on how to make that happen?
Yeah, so, well, getting the buy-in, I mean, you can be forceful about it, but you can make it fun and entertaining too. And there's a lot of good ways to educate your team, your staff on, that it's creative, that's out there. Working with the managed service providers, helpful. They usually have a few tools up their sleeve for that. The other thing I think of is like, aligning with a framework of some kind. Like, instead of just grabbing random products off the shelf, like, oh, I need next generation antivirus, oh, I need a firewall, oh, I need EDR, and now you just have a business with a bunch of products. To Nick's point, like, you just have these products sitting there working, they're supposed to be doing the thing, but nobody's really like looking over the whole thing and saying, well, we should be aligning to this framework, or you have specific requirements for compliance in your industry. And that just brings a whole new paint job on things, right? Now that's a whole new set of things that you have to think about.
So what are a couple of those compliances or procedures that you would recommend? I know there's NIST and a few others out there. What are some of the ones that you would recommend for, say, a smaller business? And then give us a few that you might recommend for a larger business.
So I like NIST because it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife for frameworks. And a lot of other frameworks were built off of it. So they'll have something a little bit different, or they add something to it that it's an extra layer, or the way they go about implementing might be different. So they might do it in phases in some of the other programs like CIS controls. It just really depends on your industry, because sometimes there's something very specific. Like if you take credit card payments, you got to be PCI DSS compliant, right? If you're doing payment information, not a lot of people know that. They think their credit card company has it taken care of for them, but really what you're doing is just paying a small fine every month. And people don't even know that, but it's a thing. And it's probably not a huge risk either, so okay, fine. But you have to think about like what industry you're in and what information do you have that could be or should be protected. I think those are the main things.
So kind of going back a little bit to the email and the phone-based scam stuff, what are some of the red flags that like employees could be looking for? Because some people are going to come back from this and go,
Oh, yeah.
hey, those guys are really smart, but I can't afford this. So what's something that they can kind of take back and just go, hey, everybody, let's focus on this? What are some of those red flags to look for?
I think commonality, similarities between cases helps get some perspective. I think we're still in the stage, most BECs or when your email gets compromised, you're going to see some of the same signs. You're still seeing, now AI is going to change some of that with some of the language barrier stuff, but we're still seeing some of the low-hanging fruit of wiring instructions sent as an attachment. So if you see that, that's probably a red flag. So domain changes, a lot of threat actors don't like to use the actual compromised email account to send email. So they'll create a lookalike domain that looks like your company, but isn't actually your company. So paying attention to those headers or those emails and actually making sure that it's coming from the original source that it was supposed to be coming from, those are still really good. And obviously language and English and grammar and all that stuff still applies. Now with AI, we're seeing a change in that because some of this stuff gets automated, like you said, with the responses, that gets better. But also, we have groups that don't use that. So we're still seeing some of the grammar and some of the English. But the biggest thing is doing that independent source verification in your processes. So building those business processes where you don't just trust the email with the wiring instructions in it. You go verify that independently of that email and step outside of that urgency or email communication. If you're doing anything financially just through email, I would recommend you change something because that's just not where I would want to live.
Yeah.
I definitely think too, like to your point, right? To teach people to slow down for a second. Because I think we're all guilty of that. Even in my personal life, I'll see there's a package or something's wrong with the package, and your knee-jerk reaction is to click on it. And I've been doing this for many years, and I still have that urgency, right, to click it and see what's going on. So I think to just take your time, review those things, and make sure everything looks legitimate, and to verify is big, but really to just slow down. Because I think when you have that urgency too, that's a big red flag, of course, that people normally don't demand. We have a gift card in 10 minutes from your CEO, and I get those too. And you think for a second, again, it crosses your mind that this could be legitimate, but when you take a couple minutes, get to the bottom of it.
So I'm going to ask a question, and Nick probably can answer this one better than anybody else, but those spoof domains or those lookalike domains, how old are those domain names actually when they start using them?
Typically not very old. So yeah, your creation time for domains, that's actually one thing that we do in our investigations as well, is how long has this domain been alive? So we can go, it's public information, DNS queries and things like that with whois searches. So you can actually train your employees as part of their process to go and look to see how long this domain's been alive or how long it's been active. Typically what we see is they've created it for that specific scam. So they use, I'm not going to name the names of companies, but cheap domain registrars to register these domains quickly for each scam.
We all thought the same
Well
thing.
put, well put.
Yeah.
We all thought the same one.
I think so. But yeah, usually like you said, that's one key indicator that you may have had a compromise is you're communicating with the domain that was created with a week ago or at least a week before you started communicating with them. It's pretty common.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen in our experience is that some of these malicious actors, they wait until day 31 and then they hit you with, or hit their target with that similar domain name. And so what we've done is, and I'm not going to give specifics either because this is kind of, I don't want to give away the goose here, but we've increased new domain name registrations in our anti-spam services to block anything that's newer than a certain number of days, and it's definitely a number higher than 30 so that our clients aren't getting hit with that stuff so readily. And so there's a reason why I asked the question.
Yeah.
It's because it's
Sure.
important to know what that domain length is. And I think it's great to teach employees to just go that extra mile and take a look at how old that domain is. If it looks like it was, within the past 60 days, that's probably not your client, right?
Right.
So Yeah, I think that's really, really important. We've got an area of this is more focused towards Nick, and we're jumping into that right now. Can you share an example where a human error led to a major security issue, and how was it addressed?
So a human error, that's almost every one of them starts that way, right? So I forget the percentage. It's very high. I don't like to give numbers because it's probably wrong. You know how stats are. But very high percentage of every cybercrime starts with a phishing email or somebody clicking a link. So we had one recently where an employee of a financial firm fell victim to a BEC. It was more like the CEO scam, but it was an emotional phish. So what I mean by emotional phish is they used emotions in order to get her to click the link. So that's something new we're seeing that they're picking up on, and I can go ahead and say it. It shouldn't work anymore because we're trying to do as much education as we can. But that emotional phish is something like, hey, your kid missed 2 classes today. Click this link to see which classes they missed and explain why they're missing from school. So that's emotion, right? They know it's going to say, oh, this is my kid's. Like, oh, wait, why is my kid missing school? Now, the person didn't pick up on the fact that, oh, wait, they usually text me when my kid's missing school, or they have this automated phone system that calls me when my kid's missing school. But that hits your emotions, right? That urgency, because it has something to do with your children. That ultimately ended up resulting in a loss of quite a bit of money. The number is over millions, but then they filed a claim with their insurance, and their insurance only covered $1 million. So that can kind of go to speak to a little bit towards insurance as well, just make sure you have the right coverage for that type of loss. But I think education was key in that, but also not blaming the employee, because who wouldn't have fell victim to that? It's new. So something we haven't seen before, but they put processes in place to where now they have independent source verification when those emails do come in, and they have a time period that has a delay built in. So they've mitigated this by adding in different business processes, not necessarily a technical change to their procedure, but business processes.
Okay, you used a technical word there. I'm going to point it out. Phish. What do you mean?
So phish, not the F-I-S-H, but a phishing email is sort of like casting a wide net. So you just email a bunch of people asking them for money, and then a number of those people will fall for it or will click the link. It's just a spear phish, or an email that's specifically designed to either get you to click a link or get you to send money, is what a phish is.
And there's another one out there that most people probably are even less familiar with. That's called smishing. What is that?
Smishing, you're definitely aware of that now because of the toll scams running around. But
Oh, yeah. I get those too.
we all do. So smishing is just phishing through SMS. So SMS is text services, short message service through your cell phone. So you get a text message that says, hey, you went through a toll in Florida and you need to pay that, right? So that's just a smish. They're just trying to send that to every phone number that they have on their system. And they use breach data a lot to send out that data, so they can actually personalize that to the people that are maybe have that phone number, so they can even personalize it as well. That's risky and also costly. It's one way that credit card theft happens, because they're really looking for you to pay this toll, but then steal your credit card and then use that. So it's more like organized crime groups that were responsible for most of that.
All right. And so sticking with the topic of Tennessee stuff, how does cybercrime impact Tennessee-based businesses differently than those in larger metro areas, or is it kind of the same? I mean, are we talking, let's say, Oliver Springs or Clinton? How is cybercrime impacting them versus, say, Knoxville or Nashville?
Y'all want to take it? No? So
I don't know.
I'd say the
You
same.
would know better than me.
I would say the same. I mean, cybercrime is a borderless crime, right? So when they scan a block of IP addresses, they don't know or care where it hits or where it goes. It goes into rural areas just as much as it does major cities. It's more about the vulnerability and who's unpatched or who doesn't have the cybersecurity budget in place. So it could be small town America that's targeted, or major cities targeted the same, because an IP is an IP, an IP address, internet protocol address. So you're just a computer on the internet that's open and wide. Hopefully not with RDP accessible to the internet, but if you do, then you're just a computer.
If you do, let's talk VPNs and multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
So cyber criminals look at it as stepping into a business by taking just one step forward in any direction, whereas most of us think of it from roads. You know, it'll take me 20 minutes to get over to Oak Ridge, or it'll take me another 25 minutes or 20 minutes to get over to Farragut. But cyber criminals only see it as a step or a click, and they're there.
Sure.
So, okay. Now, what can businesses do to ensure a smoother process if they ever need to involve the TBI or the FBI, and how does that process work? What should they do?
Yeah, so we didn't really give it an introduction for what we do and how we tie into the law enforcement or the protection space. So you got cybersecurity and then cybercrime investigations. What we call is left of bang and right of bang. So on the protection side, you have CISA and the Office of Homeland Security. It's a state level of CISA. So the critical or cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency handles all the protection side. So if your business is critical infrastructure, which there's I think 16 sectors, so you're probably going to fall into that even if you're critical manufacturing. They can help you on the protection side. But if you need a law enforcement response, like say you've had an incident that rises to the level of criminality, or you know that some crime has occurred, you can contact your local FBI field office. Obviously, independent source verification, search it on the web, the phone number. And then TBI, we have a hotline as well. And we just stood up a cyber hotline for all the businesses that want to contact TBI for support and also just to report that incident. It's 833-TBI-CYBER. Obviously, you don't use the R in that, but again, that's 833-TBI-CYBER. And that can get you to our unit, and we have cyber agents all across the state. We'd also, in cybercrime investigations, I guess it's important to say, yes, we chase the bad guy, and our role is to chase the bad guy. We're not compliance or auditors or anything like that. Our mission is to hold someone accountable for getting into your systems. But when we started working cybercrime many years ago, we realized we need to give something back to the business and help them stay protected next time. So doing these outreach and educations that we're doing right now is basically our way of saying, hey, here's what we're seeing the bad guys do. We try to educate you so you can say, oh, I've seen that, or TBI talked about that. We also keep lists of indicators of compromise and tactics and techniques that we can provide to your company if you ever have an incident. So if you have an incident, we may say, hey, we know this guy. We've seen him before. I say him because most of them are, but there's women as well. But if you need that information, we can give it to you. We use that as an intelligence value for your company to help you repair what has happened in the incident. We also still want you to work with us so we can hold those bad actors accountable because that's how we stop them from coming back into your company. Because we've always said a company that's been targeted by an individual will be targeted by that individual again if we don't stop them. Because they've been in your system once, they know the way around, so they're going to come back. So we want to hold them accountable so they can't do that again. We also have partners all around the world that we work with. FBI is our biggest partner, of course, in cyberspace. They have legal attaches in almost every country, allied countries, so we can contact them if we need support in that other country, and also work with Interpol if there's anybody we need to arrest overseas.
So you made a mention of bad actors and malicious actors. There's a story that's floating around out there, and I think Watchguard may have had it on their podcast at one point in time. One of the cyber groups was being closed in on. They knew it, and so after they'd taken and done what they did, collected their ransoms, they then turned around and sold all of their vulnerabilities that they had found to another cyber group, who then went back to those same companies and breached them again and held them ransom a second time.
Wow.
So it kind of goes to the point of, if you pay the ransom, you better figure out how they got in and keep them from doing it, because there's nothing to stop somebody who's that unethical from doing the unethical thing and either A, hacking you again, or B, selling out the vulnerabilities so that somebody else can do it, and maybe they charge a higher rate, maybe they don't, but that particular threat actor did something very entrepreneurial and sold off the vulnerabilities to make a second payday.
Sure. And
then those same companies got breached again. So it's an unfortunate thing, but it's one of those, if you're trusting them to be honest, they've already shown you that they're not, right?
Yeah, you're trusting the wrong person. Also, by the way, the government never recommends paying ransomware because it's a financial motivated crime. So if you remove the financial motivation, which is paying them, then they won't do it anymore, right?
So, okay, let's go off script here a little bit further since we're already going down that path. So what are some of the things that we can do to mitigate that so that if we do get breached, how do we make sure that we can recover from that without having to pay a ransom?
So I can step in on that. So one of the biggest things, and we talk about cyber resiliency, right? Being able to recover from an attack or recover from some downtime incident, but business continuity, disaster recovery. So it's not just about backup, it's about having a plan that goes with it and being able to virtualize systems, things like that, so that your downtime is minimized as much as possible. The other thing too is that you want to keep your systems off to the side intact so you could go back and do a forensics investigation on what happened, what went wrong. So it's like you need a second infrastructure almost to keep this operational. And there's a lot of tools out there, and that's one of the things that we do with you guys to help mitigate that downtime, but also to be able to thumb your nose at these threat actors. Like, you know, if you could ignore the ransomware request and just restore your systems and keep going. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing just that, but, you know, not a bad safeguard at the end of the day.
Sure.
Yeah, and going along with those, we're going to talk about system security policies and a few other things here in a few, but having policies in place, like a good backup disaster recovery plan, are essential in order to being able to not only know what to do, but be able to put it into action and have a set standardized process that you can follow. Because I can tell you, having worked in the industry long enough, we haven't seen a major breach of any sort, but I've worked for companies that have had clients who have gotten hit and their antivirus got circumvented, and suddenly the ransomware is throughout the entire system, and they had engineers running out to the client, literally ripping network cables out of walls, trying to mitigate
One way to
this.
isolate it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the particular incident I'm thinking of, it did not get isolated. They basically had to take everything offline and go through manually cleansing this thing with a different antivirus product in order to remove the malware and then get it secured and bring everybody back up. It took about 5 days and with 2 engineers, and it was only a company that had about 18 systems. So
That's brutal.
Yeah, and that's 18 systems. Took 5 days and 2 people working pretty well around the clock to individually get things back up and running and figure out where it came from and how to stop it so it didn't come back.
You need a better plan than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Better plan.
But in any case, moving on. So more focused on businesses, we talked a little bit about the rise of AI and how it's influencing cyber defense, cyber crime. AI is doing a lot to help the cyber criminals be a little bit better at English.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Large language models is very helpful in that regard. But what are some of the good things that AI is bringing to the table?
I guess all the same reasons, right? The way the bad guys are using AI, the good guys are using it in the same way, right? So typically you'll see a lot of people starting to use it more for to take on manual tasks. So I think it's really easy to look at AI as scary, like it's taking jobs, or it's, you know, we can't trust it. I mean, you hear so many different things, but really it's taking a lot of burden off of things that people have to do on a daily basis. So when we talk about like something like looking at alerts, if you can reduce the amount of alerts, the same person still has to go look at them and check them out, right? So we're trying to help people do their jobs better, and artificial intelligence really does a great job of that.
So how does AI help them do a better job of that, though?
Yeah, so basically what we're able to do is, it's really, we'll say like calculations, right? So if you're looking at hundreds of thousands or millions of different logs, and they're all different, they're all coming from different places, it is complicated, right, for a person to do that, even just to look at one thing and connect the dots. The way that these systems are trained is to look at things that are perceived to be normal behavior. So things that look absolutely innocent, we can take all of these different logs and connect them in a way to say, this one thing that seems to be, again, innocent is actually malicious, and flag it. So it's, again, correlating a lot of different things that it would be impossible for a person to do.
I think it works 24/7.
Yeah.
So humans need a break, but AI doesn't. So it works around the clock. So the bad guys are using that as well, but we can use that to our advantage and have stuff that's currently, constantly monitored.
And it's constantly adapting to what it's seeing, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that we do on a regular basis. And somebody was earlier today was just saying how they walked away from computers for like 3 years, 5 years, and when they came back, they're like, I can't do this. Like everything has changed so
Things have
much.
changed,
I can't jump back into it.
Yeah.
But with AI, it doesn't have to worry about that. It's constantly able to adapt and change and flex and move.
Absolutely. So like I would even just add like one other area, like even an email. So we train human beings to like look for this stuff, check it. But AI, and there's a lot of different solutions out there, but AI can actually look at that email too and be like, hey, this person doesn't send you attachments. Can you maybe make sure that the attachment they're sending you is like legitimate? Things like that. Or this person doesn't normally send you hyperlinks, or this person's outside of your organization, or they're asking you for something. There's a way to add context to even your emails that alert you to unusual activity that you might just go along with. And like, yeah, it might be weird, but you just click anyway or go along with it anyway. And like, that's the fear we have, right, with users. We put all this protection in place and they click the thing we don't want them to. So it can be another layer using AI to have that extra set of eyes.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. So we touched on cyber insurance a little bit earlier. What is your all's take on cyber insurance? I've got some thoughts, and we work with a couple of providers, and I'm close with one of them. But what are your all's takes on cyber insurance?
Well, I have to say it's like any other type of insurance. I think there's always a reason to not get a payout. So companies are more than happy to insure you, but the fine print is long and extensive, right?
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see even folks that have purchased cyber insurance, they go through a ransomware attack or something along those lines, and the company is saying, did you look at managed detection and response solutions? Did you look at an endpoint solution?
Yeah.
Now, we know that you looked at that, but why didn't you in good faith move forward with those products?
yeah.
So then, reason not to pay out. So it is good to have. I think it's very important. I also think there's a lot of other things that are components that are required too. So I don't think it's a catch-all, so you don't actually have to manage cybersecurity or deal with it.
Right.
I think for a long time, people used to say to me, like, no, we have a cyber liability policy. And, frankly, like, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a cyber liability policy. And then they started paying out on claims, and insurance companies do not like to pay claims, to Jen's point. And so they found ways to not pay out. But the questionnaires now, they're asking, like, okay, are you using EDR? What EDR are you using? Do you have a business continuity plan in place? How often is it taking a backup? How long would it take you to recover from that if an event happened? Like, they're asking very specific questions now. And even that is like surface level stuff. But it's a whole new compliance, right? It's like if you fall under HIPAA and you have a cyber liability policy, there, of course, many things are going to cross over and they're going to check boxes in both. But there might be something that's involved in HIPAA that's not part of your cyber liability policy and vice versa. So it's another thing, like you have to have a set of eyes on this saying like, okay, we're supposed to be doing this thing, but we're not doing this thing. So what of it? And make that actionable and something that the organization puts in place.
So I'm going to untack one of your terms there. EDR, it's endpoint disaster.
Endpoint detection and response.
Yeah. Endpoint detection and response. But that's effectively next generation antivirus. It should be using a little bit of AI in there, but it takes it to the next step. Can one of y'all get a little bit more in depth into what it does and how that works? Because most of us just think antivirus.
Hey, real quick, before we go there,
Yeah.
so back to cyber insurance real quick, just to give you a little bit of the other side. So I think also from the law enforcement perspective, it's improving cyber hygiene as well. So because they're saying, hey, you have to have this, this, and this in place, the companies are going, okay, well now the CEO says, I guess I got to spend money on this, this, and this, because if I want cyber insurance, because I know I need it, then I'm going to go get those tools or those products in place. So I think it is helping generally improve businesses' cybersecurity, at least the framework that they're working with, because their hygiene's improving because they have to. So it's forcing them into some of that as well. So there is benefits to, I think, cyber insurance, but I didn't want to lose that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Sorry, but back to the EDR.
No, and we'll come back to the cyber insurance because I got a nice little story that my wife went through, not with cyber insurance, but just with insurance in general. She got lucky, but it could have very easily gone a different way. But back to endpoint detection and response. So how do you all define what that is? Because there's managed detection and response, there's endpoint detection and response. What are we talking?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, I guess. So you had antivirus traditionally, and that was like a list of known bad things. And it would say, oh, this bad thing exists in your system, it's a virus, and it would go to try to mitigate that from doing anything. But next generation antivirus realizes that there's some things that aren't in the list, right? And they're just act funny, and it's in that software system. So now you have next generation antivirus, and there's usually some machine learning or something going on in there. EDR is yet another level to that, and there's definitely more AI going on, but what they're doing is saying these specific functions aren't supposed to be talking to one another inside of your system. Like, that's not, Microsoft Word shouldn't be asking this application for access to this thing over here, and without getting too far in the weeds, MDR is the team that watches the EDR. So that's your security operations center. They're using that as a tool, along with some others, obviously, but they use that as a tool to watch what's going on. They're getting these alerts. To Jen's point, they're getting all the alerts, and AI is sort of making all that noise into something more palatable that a reasonable human being can respond to and take action on. Then it does other things, like it'll help them isolate things. It'll help them say, like, well, this PC is infected, so let's make sure it can't talk to anything else. And that's where that MDR team will come in and help mitigate those further risks.
Now, I'm going to let Jennifer speak to MDR a little bit more in depth, because that is entirely her wheelhouse over at WatchGuard. And generally speaking, from an MDR, what is it that you envision as MDR?
Yeah, so when we kind of look at the network, I feel like there's so many products and there's so many acronyms, so it gets overwhelming. And I mean, we are all in this industry, and some days I'm like, what is that? Is it a new thing? Did they just invent it? Or they add a letter? So it can be very overwhelming. But when we look at kind of just your overall network, like, right, the endpoints are the furthest ones away from control. So it's stuff like your laptops, mobile devices, again, that have maybe important information on them, but the company or whoever's managing them have less control. So that's where, like, the endpoint piece comes in. Let's say, yeah, it's really like someone that is looking over and overseeing everything that is happening is that managed detection and response. And I'll kind of you want me to give you my analogies on it? You know, when we're looking at, like, endpoints, for instance, you can think of it as your home security system. So you can have motion sensors. I don't know, I have those lights in the backyard where, like, if something runs past, the light goes on. Okay, great. So I'm looking at the endpoint, so the furthest part that's outside of the house. You could put a security camera in, so then you're leveling up to that next thing. So you're saying, I want to have visibility into it. But when the light moves or something goes off, someone is still responsible to go in and see, was that a raccoon in the backyard? Was that a burglar? What was it? And if it is a burglar, who's calling the police? Who is going to take that next step? Who's going to run downstairs with a baseball bat? You know what I mean? So, like, we kind of have to look at MDR as that next step. So imagine having someone, you have those security cameras, and then someone has eyes on those cameras 24 hours a day, and they are there to walk out the front door, to apprehend the person. They're there to call the police, the authorities. So that's what MDR is in comparison to kind of EDR.
All right, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So back to the cyber
analogy.
Insurance thing, and I've got a little story. My wife had an incident. She's a solopreneur. She does marriage and family therapy. She's a licensed MFT, and her office a few years ago that she was renting out, it had an incident with a fire. And she had renter's insurance, but the renter's insurance doesn't cover fire damage. Unless, of course, it happens within the HVAC unit.
Oh.
And for whatever reason, somebody was working in the HVAC unit, and it blew up. Smoke everywhere. I mean, soot, it destroyed so much stuff. And we were looking over the policy, and it just happened that is the one thing that, in the way of fire damage, it would cover. But if you lit a match and it accidentally fell on the floor and the carpet went up in flames, they would have denied the claim entirely. So, but because it happened within the HVAC unit, she just got very blessed, very lucky, and was able to get the insurance claim. But the cyber insurance or the insurance company, I'm sure, was sitting there going, "How did you find the one non-limitation that we couldn't weasel our way out of?" So insurance companies, as much as we love them, they are also a business, and if they don't have to pay out, then they prefer not to have that expense. So we've got about 7 minutes left, and I got a couple more questions. How do businesses prepare for that inevitable? Even if they're small or non-technical, what are some of the basic policies that they should have in place?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with planning, and I think we've all mentioned that, like, to have a plan, and it's okay to know that there's a chance that this could happen. It is better to just acknowledge it than to bury your head in the sand and say, it's never going to happen to me. God willing, it never does happen to you, and that would be the best case. But if it does, you want to be prepared. So it starts with training, right? So talking to your internal people, making a plan to figure out how we can teach them to stop clicking on those links, or how to identify malicious emails, or not to fall prey, right, to social engineering scams and things like that. So I'd say planning is number one. So it's that internal training. And then certainly work with trusted advisors. That's why we work with folks like Solomon IT, why we work with managed service providers, because there's someone who understands your business, that is local to you, that is able to be your trusted advisor, and not specifically for a product, right, but for the overall health and growth and security of your organization. So I say it all goes back to planning. Always plan, plan, plan.
Planning? Okay.
Yeah. I think you brought up a couple of the policies that you really just need as a base level, right? The business continuity, the incident response, and AI governance. I think a couple of the ones that we kind of go to and talk to quite a bit. Just making sure that you have something in place that you've also tested. So not just prepare, but practice, right? So don't just write a policy or get a policy from another company that's kind of like yours and then just put that in place at your company, but actually practice that policy and put it into play. So is this going to work for me actually? Is this going to be something that I can roll out to my company? Is something that we see fall quite short sometimes? It may be even as simple as, who do I call in a breach or an incident? Or where's my stakeholder map? Because I don't even know who I call on certain things and who's going to be the point of contact. So there's certain small things that you don't want to be finding out in the middle of an incident, especially one that's considered a breach. We don't use that word, I know. At least the industry doesn't. But just say it happens. So preparing for that, and also practicing that incident response plan or policy to make sure it's not just a policy that's there but doesn't really provide any benefit. And back to the AI governance, I think the important of that one is your employees are going to use AI, so making sure that they've used it the correct way and not sending all your intellectual property to the cloud would be kind of important to me. Also, making sure that my AI models aren't lying to my customers or my employees is also pretty important. We're seeing a lot of that in that space. Also, the insider threat is something we're focused on in the government now. So how can somebody weaponize my AI or my LLM to give me false information or to poison? It's called model poisoning is what we're looking into. So making sure that stuff doesn't exist in my environment and use it appropriately. Sorry, Brian, I kind of sucked the air out.
No, I don't even know what I got to come up with something different now, because both of your answers were great. And that's usually what I say. So now I have to come up with something different. I don't know. Spend time with your family or something. No, I think it's really important that the small business work with an IT provider. And I'm just going to kind of go on this for a second, because IT providers have the benefit of working with many other small businesses. And, we've all been there where a small business says, like, I have a nephew, he's really good at technology stuff. And they bring this kid in and they think, okay, now I have this unicorn working in my office, my 20-person construction company or whatever, managing all things IT and cybersecurity for me. Life is great. And it's not, because there's no such person that exists. Like, you don't go to the eye doctor for your teeth, and there's lots of different disciplines within the IT and cybersecurity space, and you need these disciplines separately. Nobody can be an expert in all these things. So a lot of times small businesses, they're looking for this internal IT person who's going to crawl under desks, but also understand the high complex levels of cybersecurity. That's just not around. It doesn't exist. So that's why you want to partner with an IT company that has this expertise in-house. If they don't have it in-house, they partner with somebody who brings it in for them, and they've seen this pattern over and over and over again. Hey, well, okay, same thing. We need to business continuity plan. We need an incident response plan. Like, well, here's a framework for how we always do it, but maybe it's a little tweaks here and there for this particular small business.
So I got just a couple of last minute questions because we're running real close to our end point here. But if a company has limited resources, what should they prioritize first in terms of cybersecurity?
Limited budget, right? So
I asked the hard questions last.
how do most bad guys get into your systems? That's phishing, right? So MFA is important and still important. I know we've preached that so long, multi-factor authentication, because it should be the number one thing that you implement. I know it's easier said than done for some companies based on the way systems are designed and built, and sometimes it breaks stuff, so we get that too, but that's still my primary recommendation. I don't know about you, but...
Well, and it's mostly free. I mean,
Sure.
most multi-factor authentication isn't a cost thing. I'm a backup. That's your first line of defense in my world. Like, beyond doing MFA and taking some basics, like use a password manager. You know, like good password policies are a good idea too.
Good call on the backups. Like immutable backups or a backup strategy, at least something in place so you can recover instead of pay.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be, like, from a budgetary standpoint, if it's limited, like, that's going to be a big chunk of it too sometimes. It can be more costly, but typically it's something that people can, they can handle that cost, and it's reasonable. You know, it makes sense to have it.
All right. This is the last question. We're right at time. So I'm going to ask each of you, what is one thing you hope every attendee takes away from today's discussion?
Don't click on anything.
Don't click on anything.
Don't click on anything, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't click. Yeah. No, I guess not to sales pitch, but I mean, law enforcement's here to help, so we also can provide resources, and you have resources out there available to your small companies. So the government's trying to get better at this. Obviously, everybody improves and matures over time, so hopefully you've learned now that we can provide some additional insight for your taxpayer dollars.
So let me interrupt real quick before Brian goes, because I want to highlight that a little bit further. Where can they go to help get them some of those resources from the TBI or the FBI?
Yeah, absolutely. You can come straight to me, or you can call that 833 number that I gave earlier. But just reach out to your FBI field office or the TBI, the hotline or the main number, and say, hey, I want to get some resources for cyber. I want to get connected. Obviously, there's 500,000 businesses registered in the state of Tennessee, so I can't call everyone. I just can't do it, right? So I also don't know which one of those 500,000 has the capability to receive cyber threat intelligence. So I need them to come to me and say, hey, we're looking to get plugged into the Pulse. We want to get with CISA, FBI, TBI. So come to us, and we'll get you plugged in so you have all the resources at your disposal. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, yeah, and there's a couple of groups that you had mentioned in one of our meetings, InfraGuard and one of the other ones. What are those, and how can they become members of those to be a little bit more informed?
Yeah, FBI InfraGuard is a great group for businesses to talk to other businesses. Obviously, law enforcement can't recommend products or services because all vendors are great. All these guys are great, but also their competitors are great. So it's a place where we bring people together. We bring industry together so they can talk about each other's products and what works for your company. Hey, what works for your company may not work for somebody else. So FBI InfraGuard, obviously you can apply online. That application process is fairly straightforward and simple. It's just we have events occasionally. There's also cybersecurity groups that you can become part of, the Center for Internet Security, and you can become members of an ISAC. Those are also very good. I'm not promoting them. They're fairly inexpensive, but they do cost. But CISA also is a great resource that I talked about earlier. They have the cybersecurity advisories. We give those out for free. So as I work cases at the TBI or FBI, we give indicators of compromise over to CISA so they can put those in the cybersecurity advisories. So those actually have value, real-time value from the things that we're seeing today. So those are great places where you can get resources for free and get a little bit more secure today.
Thank you, Nick.
That's awesome.
And Brian, we're going to end with you.
I don't know how I could top that again. You know. So what was it Mike Tyson that said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like have a plan. Like if you walk away from this and you're like, I don't have budget for it, and like, okay, maybe I need to start thinking about budgeting for this, or maybe I need to think about working with somebody for this. All those things are good, but like leaving here and having the right attitude about it, I need to do something about this, is probably a great starting place. Because a lot of times it's like, I don't need that. It's like a pushback. Somebody's trying to sell me something. It's not about sales. It's really about mitigating risk.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we wanted to host this, is so that we could bring in experts and have everybody hear from experts in the industry of what's out there, what's going on, different ways that different places we can find resources, et cetera. So Jennifer, Nick, Brian, thank you so much for coming in. I know you guys flew in, you drove in, hours traveling, and we really appreciate your time and your energy put forth into this. And then on top of that, the multiple meetings that we had. So again, from us to you guys, thank you so much. We've got food over there. Please get some food, enjoy a taco. And once again, thank you so much. For everybody watching out there on the webinar, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
you. Yeah. Sure.